All right, everyone, welcome to GMing 101. I am Christopher Tang. I guess I'll be your moderator. I am best known as one of the people at DriveThruRPG, the world's largest RPG download store. And I will allow our panelists to introduce themselves.
I'm Eddie Webb. I am a freelance video game writer and RPG designer. Currently, my main client is Honest Path Publishing, for which I do my own future fantasy game called Pugmire.
You're also working some really cool stuff.
I mean, I worked this Rifts game, I guess.
You did actually do some really cool stuff for Savage Rift. Sean Patrick Fan, President and Creative Visionary Officer for Evil Beagle Games, Brand Manager for Savage Rifts for Pinnacle Entertainment, 30-year veteran at this insanity, author of the Fantasy Role-Playing Gamers Bible, and as I said at another panel, I've done everything in this industry there is to do except art because my stick figures have epilepsy. So, you know, it's currently, as we may have caught occasionally here, there's this little Kickstarter thing I'm starting in less than 2 hours called Freedom Squadron, which is a 7th-world setting based on the action-adventure military heroes of the 80s. Jujo! So, that's a thing I'm kind of preoccupied with, but I have been writing and designing professionally since 1988. I have been a game master since 1977, in which the year I discovered Star Wars and Dungeons and Dragons at the same time, and it has we've done a research to determine I may have been the first dungeon master in Cobb County, Georgia, that ever was running a game, because nobody knew what any of this was, and I started having people meet at the school, and nobody had heard of it, and so I go back to having self-taught how to run games, because no one else was doing this in Cobb County, Georgia at the time. I'm actually originally from Georgia, living out in Denver now. So there you go.
As a note, you've managed to reference your Kickstarter on an average of once every 7 minutes since you said.
I need to cut that down. I need once per 5, dude. I need once per 5.
All right, so let's take the temperature of the room a little bit. Everybody, please raise your hand if you've played an RPG. Everybody, excellent, so we don't have to discuss what the dice are. All right, please raise your hand if you've GM, DM, whatever an RPG. Okay, so about a third of the room. So I'm going to assume that the people who have GM and DM are interested in maybe getting better, so we'll cover some of that. And I assume that the rest of you are interested in becoming GMs or DMs and running your own games. So that's about 2/3 of the group, and we'll definitely spend some time on that. But since everybody already knows what gaming is and has already done what it is, we'll skip over those chunks. So I'm going to start with, I know the answer for myself. I'm going to ask a question to each of you. What would you say is the one most important trait in a good game master?
Good snacks. You go. All right. I really feel like the biggest factor that helps with DMing is the ability to look like you know what the hell you're doing. And specifically,
so like a competence.
A competence, but not necessarily like you have to, you don't have to necessarily be personally competent every single moment, but as long as you can make it look like what's happening is part of a cohesive experience, that solves a lot of problems. Because in my experience, with some very specific styles of RPG design, a lot of players come because they want to be part of someone else's experience. They want the game masters come in there. They have an idea of what they want to see. They want to be part of that. They want to influence that. They definitely want to shape that. But they want to know that somebody there is in control and is making sure that everyone's having a good time and things are flowing. So you're a good host. They want to feel the game master is a good host and is everyone's comfortable, everyone's happy. They'll take care of small problems. So it's a little bit of confidence, a little bit of just being a good host and making sure that the experience is enjoyable. And there can be bumps and problems along the road, as long as things are still moving forward and things are going relatively smoothly. A lot of those aren't issues, I think.
And actually, your initial joke, good snacks.
Yeah.
It's actually part of being a good host,
Exactly.
and making sure everyone is comfortable and enjoying their time.
Yep.
So Sean, what would you say is the most important aspect in a good GM?
Eddie, you ignorant slut.
Saturday Night Live from the 70s reference for everyone under a certain age.
Sorry about that.
Some people in this audience probably weren't born in that.
I know, I'm old, get over it. So, those are really good points. I will say that, and this is not meant to be a cheap plug, but there's a book out there called Aaron Olson's Strike Force.
5 minutes.
This is not Kickstarter. This is not a Kickstarter reference. It's a book that we helped develop called Aaron Olson's Strike Force. Aaron Olson was one of our most respected colleagues in the industry. A fantastic author, writer, did a lot of great stuff for a lot of companies. One of the most important books he did was called Strike Force, and we were proud to be asked to help do a revival in honor of him, of that book. And the section that I was specifically asked to write was about communication. And the reason I did that lead up is because that is something I've been talking about for a long time. There is no, in my opinion, there is no more important thing. And you said, I noticed you specifically that said, yes, I would like to start game mastery. If you walk out of here remembering nothing else Big Irish had to say, support my Kickstarter. Then, communication. Being willing to communicate across all of the different, channels that are necessary for the experience, including the start out. This is my first time, guys, and I need to talk to you guys about what I'm trying to accomplish, and I would like to know what you want to have happen. Having those session 0 conversations about this is the kind of game that I'm hoping to run, and I would appreciate if you would be patient with me as I kind of get my feet wet in this. Get open communication at the beginning, during, and at all points there along the way. There is no more important element to my thinking than being comfortable. If you are not comfortable with communication, the role of game master is going to be very hard for you. I would also say, because this hit me, is you are not an author. You might be an author, but for purposes of your role in this particular exercise, you're not an author. You're a facilitator. And as a facilitator, you are providing challenges and story elements and things to interact with, but you are facilitating the experience of others. And if you can embrace the role of facilitator, if you can embrace the role of I am providing a venue of entertainment and engagement for my friends, and I gain personal elevation from that, then you're in the right seat. And as long as you're comfortable with communication and the role of facilitator versus I'm telling a story and you're here to hear my story. No, I'm a facilitator of your experience, and I gain energy from your excitement about that. Those two key things, outside of anything else I might say during this panel, those two things would be the things I say to walk out of here with.
Right, but I mean, to kind of, not disagree with you, but kind of adjust a little bit. Facilitation does require certain amounts of, I want to say authority, guidance.
No, authority, I'm fine with the word authority.
Okay, fair. Just because some certain RPG systems...
Maybe we'll call it authority with humility.
Fair enough, yeah. A benevolent dictatorship, if you will.
Well, I mean, that's why the word facilitator works.
Right.
The facilitator is someone who has an authoritative role in anything. Like if it's a team building exercise, whatever, they're the one who's stepping up saying, this is how we're going to start, how we're going to proceed. It doesn't necessarily mean dictatorship, right? At some point, the authority may be ceded as the players suddenly, as you say, start to other RPGs, you need to pull back because they're going to run off with it.
Right. Because one thing I have learned is that there's all sorts of different kinds of players, and then Robin Laws and all sorts of other writers who divide players into different types. But when it comes to the kind of group that came together, there are groups that either will go in any direction which you simply tell them not to, and they need guidance to kind of corral them in. And those are the ones that a lot of my experience GM advice is written for, how to address those kinds of players. But there's an entire category of players that don't get a lot of attention, which are people who don't know what to do. They need prompting. And so it's a little bit of kind of, how do we get them into the game? How do we get them to feel like they're just as much a part as the people who are very loud and willing to go off and punch random people in the face? There's another group that really wants to be drawn in, and so it's a balancing act of, okay, don't do that, but how about you kind of come in? So definitely it's facilitation, but often it's also a little bit of kind of helping draw people out and also divide attention.
Now you may mark that I'm doing a cheap plug of the Kickstarter again. One of the rule sets that I came up with that's a big deal in the Freedom Spartan thing, but it's also being pushed out to Savage Worlds fans, and actually I know Shadowrun guys are excited about this too. It's called Plans and Operations, and it is a directed, there's challenges, these cards come out and they have different types of challenges, and the players have to interact with each other to facilitate how they're going to solve each of the challenges, who's going to take lead, who's going to support. And that engages their puzzle and problem solving and team building thing. But there's also a narrative element. Each participant and all the players are engaged with this, so they all have to tell a story about that. Now, here's that balancing act we're talking about.
Right.
There are players who are going to dive right in and go, oh, I got a really great idea here. We're going to go to San Francisco. I used to be an exotic dancer. I'm going to hang out with those guys. And I'm going to, this is, by the way, how Shane's character got the codename Bubbles. Shane Hensley, did the whole thing of like a SEAL team gorilla expert who used to be an exotic dancer with a stage name Bubbles. So that's how he got his code name. I'm not kidding at all.
That sounds exactly like Shane.
So Shane got in and all that, but there are times when I run the plans operations rules. I say, this guy says, well, I want to use my driving to be a support character. Okay, so what's the story? I don't know. So that's the point Eddie's talking about. That's where it's okay for you to go. So maybe what's going on is when Cecilia goes in and talks to her contact at the bank, when she leaves, having got the information from them, all of a sudden here come all the Venom ninjas on motorcycles, and you've got to be the getaway driver. So at that point, you have helped that player by saying, yes, use your driving. You made the decision to do the driving. Now I'm giving you a cool idea to play with. And what I've discovered in those situations, and it doesn't have to be that structure. It could be any kind of situation. Whenever the player's freezing, feel free to say, I'm sharing the narrative experience with you, and here's my idea. And what usually happens is light bulb, right? You help that, and then the next time they're like, so let me do this now. So that's you've got to be the person to help the other players engage.
So I think this gets back to, of course, a lot of what we've been saying about communication and whatnot. I'll just share a short story, and then I'm going to share a little something that I heard at one point. I'm going to see how you guys react to it. So just in terms of this communication and what do they want, some players you will find, like I had a recent experience in a game that I'm running where I was throwing plot at a player based on the background that he had written and the traits that he had written up, and I was like, okay, well maybe you'd like this aspect of your background. Like that? Oh, okay, maybe you'd like this. And I kept kind of putting different elements of it, and he just kept not responding to it. And ultimately, even though in a way the character sheet is a form of communication, I'm telling you what they want by what they put on that. And finally I was like, hey, so I'd like to do it. I just said to him, like, I'm kind of trying to, let's do a plot for you. What do you want? He was like, okay, I want to get rid of this background, and I want to find out that I had this whole secret background that I didn't know about. I'm like, okay, cool. But that was communication. And part of how he had learned himself, he discovered in play that this thing that initially he thought he wanted, he didn't want, because of how it actually felt when the rubber hit the road. So in terms of that experience, I was at DragonCon a few years ago. I actually had a video game writing panel, and one of the people on the panel was GMing, who is both a comic book writer and a video game writer. And with that sort of resume, one of the natural questions that came from the audience was, what's the difference between being a comic book writer and being a video game writer? And his answer is, well, when you're writing a comic book or any form of traditional fiction, be it a novel or movie or whatever, you're writing a narrative. You know who the characters are, you know what they're going to do, you know the events that prompt them to respond or take action, or how their actions then change the world. In a video game, you're not writing a narrative, you're writing an experience. What is the experience of being an adventurer in a magical world, of being a dog in a magical world, of being a super soldier going on fantastic adventures against bizarre toyetic enemies?
Toyetic is a great word.
It is great. You're creating an experience, and similarly, we as game writers are doing that to facilitate you. The game master is there to help create that experience. And sometimes what people say they want initially is not necessarily what they want, but you don't know that till you try it. Like in my story where the guy wrote down what his background was, but then when it actually happened, now he wasn't angry at me for throwing his background at him, he just learned that he didn't like it. So what would you say about game as experience as opposed to narrative?
So one thing that I've found really successful over the past decade or so of my game acting, a lot of my players find that they want to play the next cool game. And so play a game for a few months, say, cool, I'll play something game now. And so we had a career littered with half-finished chronicles. And so I started doing like TV shows. So we're going to 12 sessions, and it's going to have an arc, like a season. And at the end of the season, we'll decide if we want to renew for another season. So we're committing to 12 sessions, 14 sessions, whatever. And so the natural evolution of that was the idea of a pilot episode. So we have 1 or 2 sessions where you play, and then after that, it's like, okay, everything's off the table. If you want to completely recast your character, if you want to completely change your character sheet, if you want to throw out a new character, this stuff happens in pilots and TV shows all the time, and it allows them, because sometimes what you have in your head as a player, like you said, the character sheet basically votes for these kind of things I want to be involved in. And sometimes when you're playing, the combination of how the game masters are in the world and how the other players are reacting to it, you find there's a different texture or tension or dynamic than you were initially expecting. And so then it becomes, oh, okay, well in that case, you know, I originally had a very action-oriented character, but we're doing a lot more talking and fighting, so I want to shift my character much more to fit with the rest of the group. So by having 1 or 2 sessions where it's like, none of this counts, you're not committed to any of this stuff, it frees up that you can explore and play and find in play, this is the experience I genuinely want. Because sometimes that experience, literally on paper, does not map up to the actual what's happening on the table.
I'm going to come in for different things because the general point was the experience.
Yeah.
So, you know, I'm a big fan of, oftentimes when people sit down to play, you know, with me the first time, if they don't really know the experience, I have pre-generated characters, and they'll play the pre-generated character. But I encourage them. Hell, I'll make changes right away. Like when Lynn Pimentel was playing with us, he's my partner in the company. We got to play his codename character Lobo, and he was doing this really cool scene. I think he borrowed it from a television show. It's probably not one I watched, but he's a gunslinger type, right, very cowboy-esque kind of thing, and he's supporting the interaction challenge, and they've captured this guy, and he takes like a chapstick thing and he uses it and pretends like it's a giant, because he's using twin 50 caliber revolvers, right? So big freaking crazy, you know, guns and stuff like that. So he takes his chapstick thing and he like leans over the guy, and he you know, takes the bullet, he just sort of drops it on the guy's face, and he says, "Next one's coming faster." So, you know, and the character had no intimidation. And I'm like, oh hell no. So I grabbed the character sheet immediately and I made a couple of hits, boom, now you have intimidation, because he wanted to play the character that, you know, where that was a thing, and they're like, let's go with that.
Right.
And that's what I really want to flexibility for the sake of fun, right? You do need to have an authoritative, like, you know, this is what we're playing versus we're not playing that. And you do want, you know, this is, what you value does matter, right? If I want to run an epic heroic fantasy game and I have a couple players who are trying to skew it more, you know, Game of Thrones, ugly, you know, nasty, whatever, backstabby, and I'm not going to enjoy that, then it's okay for me to assert via communication, guys, that's not the game I wanted to run. But at the same time, if players are engaged with the idea, but they're doing some really interesting things that you did not consider, and you know, but clearly the table's energy is moving, and that was fun, that was cool. Go with that. Go with what's. You don't want to. You still want things to be challenging, but you never want to neg the experience. You don't want to be the person that's saying, "Well, I wasn't ready for that." So no, never ever do that, right? You know, whatever notes you did, whatever prep you did, never over prep. By the way, that's my other thing. Is that I've learned it. Back in the day, you know, reams of all these things. World building, yes, go crazy, have fun, because the more you know about the world that you want to run, the more foundation you have to be able to then be flexible, because you understand how that works, so you can play off that. But don't over prep the sessions. Don't over prep whatever. My sessions are a paragraph about what the bad guys are doing, a couple ideas I have for how the players might, you know, solve it, and if they get stuck, I can throw that in there some way, and then some bad guy stats, and that's it. Everything else is based on whatever the players are coming up with. So just want to throw that out there. But I will tell you, the performance as a game master cannot be underestimated. I'm going to show you a little trick that players who played with me before get. It's because it's about the experience, right? It's not about the narrative. I'm not writing a narrative. I'm providing an experience, and that experience includes my interaction with my players. So we're playing, and you have just come up with this really cool idea. And it's like, so I'm going to do this thing, and that means I'm going to like basically drop the car on the bad guy's head. Right? Yeah. My players know. All right, players who've been playing with me forever know that they know that's a trick. They've seen that we've talked about it after the thing. They know that this is a performance thing. They don't care. They still get giddy every single time I do that. It's like professional wrestling. We all know what that is, but we still get pumped when the Undertaker comes out and the dong. We still get pumped when when the other guy willingly rolls up into a ball and allows himself to be pounded into the thing,
Right.
which we know that they're.
Because Tatum's not doing well these days.
Yeah, we don't care. We still get off on that. We still think it's a scary also because we buy in. The point being, it is, and I keep going to you because like I feel like I want you to get there. I want you to get this, and I'm really encouraging you because, quite frankly, we need more women on that side of the table. We really, really do. So thank you for stepping up. But that little performance of, oh, for God's sake, you actually want them to be happy. You're not actually an opponent to them, right? You're not trying to beat them. But that extra emotional context of, I can't believe you're doing this to me, gives them an additional sense of, yeah, I came up with a good idea, and that's magic.
So now that's a really great statement where I'd like us to go next as a group, because right now so far we've talked a lot about sort of macro levels,
Yep.
so these big ideas of communication, trust, humility, but that's a trick. So I would like us to spend a few minutes talking about some specific actionable tricks that I was going to say you can't find any book, but Sean's actually written the book. So
Literally written the book out.
he might say some things from his book, but I'd like to, and I'm going to start out so I can give an example of kind of what I'm talking about in terms of tricks to make sure that you have a great table. Now, one of the things that I've adopted in the last handful of years that has made my games so much better is that when everyone's sitting down to create a character, or even if we're doing it separately or whatnot, I tell people the one thing that their characters in this group need to buy in on. Now, some people might think, oh, well, the game kind of determines that. Like you're in D&D, we're Grave Robin fantasy adventures, or we're in Shadowrun, we're a bunch of criminals. I can't tell you how many times, especially in high school, that did not sort of sort itself out. I had a weirdest experience ever. This was when I was 16, so we were a lot more violent at table. And I decided that I was going to create this really unique character. I was going to be a good aligned necromancer who was searching for the meaning of death. People worry about the meaning of life, but what is the meaning of death? I was reading a lot of Nietzsche. And and so I came in and I'm this good necromancer. And two other people, we had all made characters independently. And the two other characters at the table both decided to kill me. One, because he was evil, and he decided a good necromancer was an abomination. And the other guy was good, and decided necromancers in general were an abomination. And I just got killed, and that was the end of that campaign. So then, what I advise is I tell people, here's the one thing your character needs to be on board with. Make a character that's on board with this one concept, and everything else is up to you. So I have a table right now where there's a Pathfinder table, and I told them, you need to make a character that if they find a treasure map, will look for that treasure. They will not sell the treasure map, they will not question its veracity, they will go to where X marks the spot just to see what will happen. You need to be on board for that. I have this whole other Pathfinder table. I mentioned, I don't know if anyone was listening, but I'm running Kingmaker. Your character needs to be on board with the idea that you're going to be in charge of and running a kingdom. Even though that's not where we're going to start. That's not where this campaign begins. You need to be on board with that. And if you're on board with that, then everything else is fine about your character. Feel free to do whatever you want. And I'm not going to iterate through every game I've done this with, but that's what I would say is a trick, a very specific, actionable trick, which goes into a lot of the things we're talking about. Here's communicating my expectations to my players so that they don't create something completely like, I'm like, well, why is it these characters are with these characters? Like, why is it that, like, the anti-paladin and the rogue with a heart of gold are together? Like, why? Oh, well, they're both treasure hunters. Okay. So I would say that's an actionable trick. So what are some actionable tricks, specific tricks that you would like to share?
I don't actually consider that a trick. For me, it's not. For me,
Okay.
that goes back to communication, and I'm much more.
I'm
much more Il Duce about it because it's not like you have to buy into this one thing, but you could still be the anti-paladin and not think with heart or gold. I would not run that game, and that's me, right? So for me, I run heroes, right? The world is dark enough, so I want heroes. I want good guy games. So I make sure I communicate that. And at this point, my players don't even question it. But new people, I have to tell them, I am a GM who facilitates good guy experiences. It doesn't mean everyone has to be exactly the cookie cutter same. You know, there's Han Solo, there's Luke Skywalker, there's different styles of good. But ultimately, you want to be on the not evil side of things. You want to be not malevolent, right? You may have a slightly selfish streak, but you don't actually want to screw over and I tell everybody straight up, say, those are my expectations. Now let's talk about your expectations. And I think this, what you talk about as a trick, I talk about as a vital session 0 experience. So, I'm just saying, I want to extra emphasize.
Let's call it a technique.
Technique is fine.
Technique. Yeah, there are some very cool tricks, like I said, that glasses on the table. But let me process that some more, just because I was running off that. Eddie, what do you got?
Oh, sure. Yes.
Can I say that Sean ruined me completely? Sean was my first DM in high school,
I have to.
35 years ago. Isn't that?
Sorry. In what way did I ruin?
And so, yeah, D&D these days, especially Adventures League, there's at least one lawful evil player every single freaking table.
Yep.
And 50% of the games, AL games I play, they don't want to be heroes.
Yep.
Even the lawful good players don't want to be heroes.
Yep.
And that's the only way I know how to play.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I sat down at a table with a bunch of people I really wanted to play with, and they were being pirates with their goal of being, renowned for their pirating. and so, yeah, I had to trash the character. I had to set the character I had aside and make a neutral fighter, because neutrals is
Basically, sorry, not sorry.
Yeah.
Because, I think we did game all the way back then, so.
Well, I have another technique to talk about. So something I'll talk about in a minute, but I want to hear something from Eddie about this.
I have a couple of things, some of which relates to the performance idea. I love hiding my notes and my screen, not because I don't trust players to not look at my notes, but because I can lie like crazy. Lawrence Block once famously said that a writer is someone who gets paid to lie. And I really feel like, in a certain sense, Game Master's the same way. And there's this weird balance. To go to video games for a moment, if you walk to a random non-player character video game, click on them, they tell you something, we are trained that what they're saying is objectively true, unless there's some very obvious way where they're not telling the truth. And so when a NPC in a video game lies, it becomes a weird, discordant moment. It's like the game is telling me something that's wrong. And there are some games that had genuinely dug into that. I can give you a list after the show if you want. But as a game master, everything you present to the players is true to them. So if you can say things that are objectively not true, that inherits the experience, it does well. And so the trick I'm thinking of is, I will, the players do this, shoot kick out of them in a battle, and it's, I don't want players to die here. This is not a major fight. So I'll start rolling dice on my screen and go, man, my dice are rolling. I'm rolling 20s, 19s. My dice are terrible today. Oh man, you guys got them. That was, turns out they were weak to radiant damage. Yeah, absolutely, you killed that guy. Because it doesn't matter. But to them, what I said is now truth. I rolled terrible. And then after the game is over, comes down to Sean's point, there's a liminal space at the game table where it's like, when you're at the table, certain things become true or not true. And then after you leave, I thought tell you I was lying. I'm like, okay, but it doesn't change your enjoyment of the moment, like the dropping glasses thing, because in that liminal space, Sean is telling you that you have done something amazing and is rewarding you by dropping glasses, even though you know it's a trick. So by pitching what you say, by controlling your voice, it's almost voice acting to a certain extent. I've learned a ton of game mastery from talking to voice acting friends. So if you start really carefully and slowly describing exactly what the room you're going into is, players know that they should start rolling for fucking traps right then. I just say it. But if you go, okay, you open the door and you walk in, okay, fine. But the door is metal and there's bands across it and there's a strange glow. It's, okay, I'm throwing my fireballs at it, whatever. Something's weird about that door. So the other trick is if you over-describe or if you change your cadence or if you alter your voice, not accents, but just actually change how you're speaking, people will pick up on those cues. So if you want it to be more dramatic, slow it down. If you want players to become scared, you say, okay guys, for this scene, no side talk. Only speaking your character. if you control tempo of what's being said, because the entire game is our voice, really. I mean, there's dice, there's rules, yes, but really the whole game is our voice and our imagination. So the more we can control our voice and do little things like that, really helps the experience.
So, getting into the realm of tricks, it is, as Eddie says, best if you're at least somewhat a frustrated actor, if you want to be a game master, so that you can, because the more that you bring the performance in, the more capable you come from, the more, I mean, they will care less if you know exactly how that grappling rule works than they will that you're creating that emotional experience. They will, that's really the trick between I'm tonight's game master because we desperately needed one versus I'm the game master everybody's signing up for and I have a waiting list. And so a couple more tricks are you know, and I do believe in accents, right? People tend to know right away that I'm in character as one of the entities because I've changed my voice in an accent sort of way or whatever. So that's a nice trick. Learn how to be, I said you're not an author, but you are kind of a screenwriter, or at least you should be. And when I say that, what I'm saying is, say you're trying to pitch a cool scene, and you know, imagine you were the guy trying to pitch a really cool scene in the movie to the producer or whatever. You're going to do the same thing with your players. And what I'm saying is, so the guy made the really cool driving check to get away from the ninja motorcycles. So that's the moment where you should. So right there at the end, you come off this this hill. There's nothing but space below you, and you're going over a bus. And then, bam! You hit that one corner. You swerve, and then you cut left, and the motorcycles can't keep up. And you bring all the energy and power you can to that description, and the player's like, oh my god, I did not know my character was that cool, right? So that's one trick is to grab their moments where they got a good die roll and a basically cool idea, and then you run with it. You give it meaning and importance.
That's when the camera cuts to that moment.
And then you translate that a little bit down the road as you get your players comfortable with these ideas of it's okay to get cinematic. And I'm big about action movie cinema being the emotional experience. That's just my style. So it's biased that way. But a little bit later, that same character is doing another cool driving check or something like that. Experiment with this. Once you see that they've got buy-in to this, it's like, okay, so you managed to not get hit by the venom tank, and you're headed to the boat. Describe the scene for me.
Yeah.
And give them that chance. Give them a chance to get involved and to get excited with the interplay as well. It's like, so what happens? And if they stall, it's like, so I'm thinking maybe I guess we're on the dock now, and oh yeah, and there's a cart there, and you got to swerve around the cart. Oh yeah, so make a roll, you know. So make it an exchange. It's okay. It's like, you know, you just pull them in and then get to the exchange.
Go off that, actually remind me of something else. Did any of you watch Critical Role? So some of you recognize this. One thing I found once in a while is developing catchphrases, like in the dropping glasses thing. Matt Mercer uses "How do you want to do this?" Which is exactly talking about the describe a scenario, but also by using that exact phrase every time, he's cueing to them, "You've done a cool thing." It's actually beneficial to develop a catchphrase or a moment or like, you know.
So my catchphrase is, so tell me what happened.
Right, that's what happened. I've heard him use that a few times. For me, I don't do that so much, but a lot of times, like, I'll look at my dice and go, okay, that happened, and it's usually they kill my character, you know, because I have more understated style. But I've had points where I didn't realize I was doing it until players started cheering when I said that. I'm like, oh, I have a catchphrase. I should probably be using that explicitly more often.
Right. For my next trick, I'm actually going to go back to what you said, Sean, about don't over-prepare. Because I'll tell you right now, I used to be an over-preparing GM.
Yeah, we all go through that phase.
And I would like to tell you, maybe you'll never leave that phase. I know some perfectly excellent GMs who spend so many hours, and they receive a lot of pleasure from that time preparing. But
I never use it.
yeah, that's another thing, is that they will plan campaigns in their spare time that they're not even running just because it's fun.
Right.
But one of the things that helped me transition from a very prepare ahead of time GM to a more improvisational GM, and also actually, in my opinion, made me a better GM in general, is when I thought about the challenges that I was throwing at the players. One of the things I thought about, and this helped get away from a railroad sense, is like, let me think of 3 different ways that this problem can be solved.
Mm-hmm.
And not just 3 ways conceptually, 3 ways that these characters that I have at the table. So like, if nobody has really good social skills, maybe there's a way of talking your way out of this, but I need to think about how my players would actually do it. Like, what are 3, not just murder it, maybe murdereth one. But, like, maybe point number 2 is like, oh, the giant loves elderberries. If you bring him a basket of elderberries and give you whatever you want, let you through the pass. Like, that will have, like, so I think of, back when I was an over-preparer, I thought, what are 3 different ways that they can solve this problem? And the thing is, they may choose option 4 that you didn't think of, but because you thought of 3 different ways of thinking through the problem, you know, especially if you're an over-preparing GM or you're one of those people.
You're not stuck on the one true way.
Yeah, you're not stuck on like, but no, they have to kill it. No, the basket of elderberries is the thing that unlocks this section, like a video game. Like it gets you to think about the situation from multiple angles, which will both make you more accepting of them finding another way. It also would inform you of how that person or that environment would react to the thing that you did not expect. So for my next piece of GMing base, I shall go to ancient Greece and the Oracle of Delphi, because at the entrance to the Oracle of Delphi, it actually there was a saying that was "Know thyself." In other words, and what the Greeks knew was, if you really know yourself, you already know your future. And I would say, as a GM, something you were saying, Sean, about you want a heroic table. That's something you know about yourself. So I would say another piece of GMing is know what you want. So we've talked a lot about making sure your players are happy. You need to be happy too, or you're going to
absolutely.
be miserable.
That goes back to what I said earlier, that your values also matter.
Yeah.
Because a game will not sustain if the game master runs out of enthusiasm for the experience.
Actually, if I can, a very perfect example of this. For a long time, my career, I worked at White Wolf, and I worked at World of Darkness. And basically the exact opposite kinds of games that Sean likes. And one time we had a very frank conversation where Sean's like, I love you, Eddie as a creator, we're good friends, I can never read anything you write because it's completely opposite of my style. And that was very telling for me, and since then I've now written a game that is more your style. I'm very much like,
Desperately want to
Sean
play, and I think they've scheduled me out of being able to play.
Yes, because I hate you. But I mean, it's very true. It's that, you know, because he knew himself, and he had a frank conversation with me, is like, I will never enjoy anything in this groove because it's not my style.
I turned down working on Rogue Trader back when FFG had the Warhammer 40K license.
Yes, you were not
I could have been the lead guy on Rogue Trader, which was a big deal. It would have made me a lot of money and made me a lot of. I looked at it and I was like, oh my God, what an opportunity! I am not that guy. And instead, what happened is because I explained why I was not that guy. They're like, oh, well, wait a minute. You're Mr. Would you like to work on Star Wars then? Boom! So that worked out. You know, it actually played off for me, to be honest. But you know.
Well, once again, know yourself. If all of your players are screaming for Star Wars, and you can't stand Star Wars, don't run Star Wars. Like.
Now, sometimes there are ways you can have conversations, but you're right. I mean, the general advice is, if it's something you're not into, but it's also nice to have a conversation. Okay, why do you want to play this?
What?
What are you really looking for?
One of the
meet in the middle.
One of the worst things I ever did as Game Master is I ran a Star Wars game, and I didn't tell the players until 6 sessions in it was actually called the Cthulhu game.
I would kill you.
That is exactly the reaction I got. Because I'm like, oh, he's super clever. And it's like, it's a surprise, it's actually called Cthulhu. And for some reason, the game didn't last after that. Because the players were and I learned a ton from that. Similarly, to be a little more honest about it, when I was early running my horror games, I had a female player that I forced her into a rape scene when I was younger, and I deeply regret that because now I understand why that was horrible. At the time, I thought I was just being edgy and cool. I was, 16 and I didn't know better. And she got really offended, and we had a strange relationship because I did all the open communication. So there is knowing what you want at the table as a game master, making sure that matches up with what the players are expecting. So yes, know yourself, absolutely. Enjoy yourself as a player, but also making sure that players are going to be okay with what stuff you're putting on the table, especially when you're talking about darker, grittier, more realistic games, because the closer you get to reality, sometimes what our community calls bleed, the idea of your emotions bleeding into character and vice versa, can become a very significant concern. And also as a game master, if the players are starting to do and talk about stuff that makes you uncomfortable, You know, it's like, okay, guys, I really don't want you to go in this direction. It's just saying, it's like, we're not doing this. We're not going that
You
route.
brought up something I really want to get into,
Okay.
actually. Who here has heard of the concept of the X card?
Yeah.
All right, so if you don't know about the X card, it is a technique, and there's multiple ways to do this. You don't necessarily have to formalize it, but it is a nice and easy way of doing it. It's a really good idea for convention games. I don't tend to do it in practice because all of my games are we're all good guys and we're not going there, and I just establish up front. But I do tell players that if there is a moment at this table that is making you uncomfortable, I want you to be empowered to say so. I want you to say, can we have a break here real quick? And like, okay, or whatever it is. But the point is, one way or another, you need to walk out of this room also realizing that if you're going to be a game master, it is on you to be the primary source of this is a safe space. This is a good space for people. This was meant to be an entertainment experience. If everyone in a close-knit group, all on the same exact page with clear communication, are like, yeah, we want to get edgy, we want to go to some dark places, and we're all willing to explore those. That's up to you and your friends if you're there, right? But for the most part, you need to accept that you don't know everything that happened in another person's life. So don't just willy-nilly go to those spaces, and don't let other people go to those spaces without it being clear that everyone's comfortable. And if anyone's not, you pull away from that. You've got to make sure, this is entertainment, this is fun, right? This is not meant to be a deep exploration of somebody's psyche or a triggering experience because of somebody's personal drama. And on another side of that, it's breaking my heart that I am reading articles by primarily women in our culture who are writing about their experiences at game conventions.
Yeah.
The experiences that they're describing, I remember from the late 70s and the early 80s. This was written this year.
Right.
It is we still have people at conventions or in other spaces who are doing things like being extremely misogynistic and extremely patronizing. It's like, oh, no, honey, don't worry about it. We'll handle the rules for you. Or patronizing to a younger player who's very enthusiastic about participating, but is being, the older player doesn't have any patience for them. So we're driving younger players away. We're driving women players away. We're not showing tolerance and acceptance of non-traditional mentality. Where it's like, no, I want my barbarian woman in the bikini, and I don't need your progressive crap getting in my game. We need to not tolerate that. We need to. We talk about we want to be inclusive. I don't want to include bad people. I don't want people who are hurting other people necessarily to be the ones we want included. And that's my personal thing. You may disagree with me on that, but I'm saying we need to make this the best space possible for everyone. And as game masters, you are on the front line of that goal.
To kind of direct back to elements and tricks, I mean, you glossed over, but the X card specifically, what the actual trick is that there's a card in the middle of the table with an X on it. And all the player has to do is point to it, and that topic immediately stops. You don't have to explain it, you don't have to justify it, so you just tap the card, and the game master will pick it in a different direction. So the actual specific trick is to reduce the amount of barrier for people to express concerns. And ideally in a way that allows for the experience to actually continue. So the specific trick is tap a card, or in LARP, there's a new one called regular green, which basically is if someone's in a tense situation, they feel like, I'm fine, I'm a little shaky, or can you stop?
QA.
So, yeah.
Yep, it is. We've got 10 minutes left, so I think it's time to open up for questions. Please raise your hand if you have a question, so that we don't all talk. So we don't all talk at once. All right. Oh, yes.
When you're running your first, so I'm new to D&D. We've been playing maybe 6 months, something like that. So we have a DM who's writing his own campaign. Would you start with D&D or would you start with Pathfinder for your very first campaign that you were going to lead?
If I'm a brand new person to gaming, this is my professional opinion as a designer. 5e is a much easier buy-in right now.
Yes.
Nothing against Pathfinder, but it is an evolved system that they're currently going through a major revision of. That is an extension off of 3.5 D&D, and that's a pretty deep, crunchy experience. 5e, D&D 5e, at its basics, really does a nice job of stage by stage, ease in kind of experience, and the mechanics are just a lot smoother to kind of wrap around those beginnings. You don't start getting the more advanced elements until the characters start leveling up, so you as a GM can kind of level up with them and get more comfortable with that stuff.
I disagree with you.
Of course you do, because you're a bad person, you should feel
It's
bad.
true. Whichever game gets the players most excited is the one you start with. Because an easy game that no one's buying into is really hard to learn. A complex game that everyone loves is easy to learn because there's passion and desire to learn it.
We're neither one of us are actually wrong. You are absolutely correct on the emotional side of things.
Basically, I'm right, except for play by is what you're saying.
If neither of the games has a particular passionate drive, and it's strictly about analyzing the mechanics aspects, then I would say that I probably have a point.
Yeah.
But you're right, if everybody at the table would rather delve into Pathfinder, then yes, you should go.
I would also argue that if you want to play in a game that has a lot more support so you don't have to think about as much stuff to create, Pathfinder is an excellent idea because you have 10 years of material to draw.
Can't argue with that.
Yeah.
So
Getting back to the whole like inclusivity and whatnot, my wife is a brilliant game master, and in fact, the way we started dating is she invited me to her table for a game because she found out I was one of the few people who was interested in playing Houses of the Blooded.
that is so adorable.
Yeah, that's how we started dating.
We bound over House of the Blooded.
And
Yeah,
terrifying. That actually
Very,
terrifying.
very terrifying.
So,
I both want
it works.
a vampire one.
at least
so.
we paired off and took ourselves out of the pool, right? But
That's also horrifying.
arguably, though, House of the Blooded, although very narrative, is not really a super crunchy game, right? Now, because she doesn't like particularly D&D, she'll play it, but she's not a huge D&D person or, variants. And especially because of the way our community is, she's always like, well, I like to gym, but I'm not really a rules person. I'm not really a rules person and whatnot. And let me tell you, in the last year, she has discovered games. Thanks partially because as drive-thru, I'm like, oh, well, there's this game, and now I'm aware of more things, so now I have to spend more money on Kickstarters especially. But she has discovered...
I'm a Kickstarter.
It's been 25 minutes, I will give you that.
So we have discovered all these games, and she has started reading like books without setting, cover to cover, because she has discovered that she loves crunchy rules if those rules facilitate story and narrative and setting. So, for instance, she has discovered a great love of running Torque. She looked at me a little side-eyed when I supported that Kickstarter. She's like, that sounds weird. And then once she actually played, she was like, no.
In truth, the answer to your question is neither D&D nor Pathfinder, it's Savage Worlds.
Yes. Figure out another thing is if you've been playing D&D for a while, what are you excited about? What is if everybody in your group is like, wow, we love Star Wars and we read Star Wars novels, maybe play Star Wars. If everybody rewatches that one season of Firefly once a year, maybe the answer is, I see a look happen, maybe that's, maybe, I'll tell you right now, I have a horror game going on right now, where, I don't know if any of you are familiar with it, but it's free on YouTube, and actually released by the studio, so legally free. The Dead Gentlemen have a horror series called Demon Hunters. And
Horror comedy.
it's a horror comedy, but in my opinion, part of the brilliance of Shakespeare is he understood that people can't cry all the time, they can't laugh all the time, and horror is the same way.
Yeah.
And that if you have higher highs where people get to laugh, then the darker darks can get darker. So part of how that came, we had one person in that group, and she's a longtime friend of mine, and I was like, hey, have you ever, there's a Demon Hunters role-playing game, maybe we should do that as our next campaign. She's like, there's a game? And then other people at the table, I haven't seen that. She's like, we're watching it now. And we sat down, and we actually all watched the movie together, and that was the beginning. That was our real session zero, was watching a movie together. But it's meant that I've been able to respec rules from various Call of Cthulhu and other horror game things that I've been wanting to run forever, but never had a horror group. But because it's Demon Hunters, when they do silly things, I don't get mad. And I don't be like, and when people want to do silly things to relieve the tension because things are getting a little weird, everybody buys it. But there's this whole buy-in because we all love that movie. And speaking of people who were told they're not rules people, the woman who was the deep lover of that movie, who was like, we're watching it now, she has never read a game book cover to cover. She's read setting sections and she's read little bits of setting. With this game, because she fully bought in, she read that book cover to cover, every single rule, every single thing, because she was excited.
And because of passion. Did we answer?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
We're 5 minutes. Question? Anybody else?
You have a
Yep.
So, I'm going to date myself here, but when I got into Dungeons & Dragons, it was 2nd edition. And,
You're a child.
Seriously, you're young.
well, I know, but for
No, I
some
am
of,
too.
I'm
I
not,
know.
y'all are,
We're ancient,
There
yes.
was no edition number.
I got in 2nd edition. I'm with you, man. Let's go there. Come on.
so, so you had these, like, proliferation of, like, prefab adventures. That, so how do you deal with a group that kind of wants to go off the rails, but you don't have enough GMing experience to really?
There's 2 approaches. One, that open communication, where you would let take, okay guys, my apologies, I know this is kind of where you want to go, but I'm just not ready to handle that. Could you do me a favor? Could we kind of maybe orient over this way instead? And give me a chance
Or
to
give
kind
me
of-
30 minutes by myself.
Yeah.
Well, I would be more like, I don't want to take 30 minutes. I want to go ahead and just keep playing. And it's like, so, but I understand what you guys are wanting to do, so if you give me.
Maybe next session we
We'll
can meet
play
that.
through this for now, and the next session I'll get ready to handle that other thing. That's one way to go. The other way to go is eventually you will get to the point, and that's, so you're being honest with yourself right now, that's fine. But you want to get to the point where like, okay, I got a monster manual, I can handle it. We'll go that way, something will happen, I'll pull some stats out. This is why I said, you know, and I want to reiterate this as a walk away, you know, you want to get to the point, I think, most of the GMs I've dealt with, as they realize that they get to this point, it's very comfortable. I know what the bad guys are doing. I know what some of the key factions involved in the story are doing. I know a set of stats, so that no matter where they go, I've got some bad guys for them to fight. And that's all I ever bother with anymore. And from that point, it's like I throw some stuff out, where are they going? It may be a jungle, it may be an underground basement, it may be, you know, a cloud city, I don't know, but I got the bad guy stats for wherever they end up meeting them at that point. And that's all I need is the stats, because that's the mechanics aspect, and everything else is going to be near exchange. That's where you want to try to find your way to. But until then, that open communication of, guys, I'm just not ready to handle that right now. Can we maybe just focus on this for now, and I'll set up to run that next time. Make sense?
Yeah, no, I had to drop 2nd edition because I just couldn't stand Thaco. So I just ended up making my own home-brewed RPG and ran that for 10 years.
I
So
would
when
say,
which Kickstarter start?
so,
Mine starts in an hour.
I would say another thing is, the way you deal with that is you just do it. You're not going to be good at it the first time. You accept that. And sometimes that's just saying the things like, guys, just to be honest, you were going in a direction that modularized didn't write, that I didn't prepare for, so I'm going to do my best. We're going to roll with it. But if I seem to be like checking my notes a lot or thinking for a second, just be patient. Because you're going like, you know, the module says like, the nearby town is Westford. Let's go to Westford. There's nothing in this module for that, guys. So just like, and you just tell them, I'm making this up as we go. So, like,
There's actually
at which point they might say, oh, well, we thought it was a clue. If it's not really a clue, let's get back on track.
Right.
But they might say, heck yeah, let's see you dance.
Or there's another dirty trick that current game design and development has kind of taken us to, and you can totally rip it off. It's like, all right, guys, what's in Westford?
Yeah.
Ask
You get to help me build Westford now. What's in Westford? Where are you going in Westford? Well, is there an alchemy shop? Sure. So who's in the alchemy shop? Tom. Who's in the alchemy shop? Some old dwarf named. Boom. Suddenly you're engaging the player narrative, and they're helping you write.
I have 2 perspectives I use, which build off of my previous tactic of lie, and they are cheat and steal. So you see it. Cheat is, okay, I have a town here, but they want to go to Westford. That town's not Westford. Oh, look, you're back into my story. No matter where you go, it goes to my story.
That's a good one.
But steal also is, there's been a lot of times where I'm trying to improvise, and like Sean, I have an index card of improvisation. But sometimes they'll go, you off my vague plans, and I'll just start pulling stuff from TV shows I saw recently, books I read recently. And as long as the players haven't also watched that show or read that book, I'm good. And if they have, then they'll comment on it, and I'll laugh, and then we keep going, because that's all I got right now.
Picasso once said that good artists borrow, but great artists steal.
Yep, absolutely. And I'm a great artist.
Steal from everything.
Everything, except for Sean.
Yeah, nice to meet you. We're at 11.
Yeah, there we go.
All right, so
My cheek steals every one.
the next panel's not for a half hour, so I think we're willing to be more personally conversational,
Yeah.
unless you guys have somewhere to go.